You're nothing but a mistake, Daniel. Every kiss, every vow, I regret it all. You scrub floors while Patrick saves lives. By Christmas, I'll be by his side, not yours. You've lost your job, and now you've lost me. Patrick is powerful, respected, everything you'll never be. Those were the cruel words Clara spat at her husband as she walked out, her suitcase snapping shut like a final judgment. What she didn't know was that the man she mocked as a failed orderly was the silent owner of the very hospital she thought she had conquered, and he had already begun orchestrating the most brutal revenge she could never imagine. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal felt like a knife to the chest? What would you do, forgive, or destroy? Clara's heels clicked sharply against the marble tiles of their modest living room. Her eyes burned with the kind of rage that had been simmering for years, now boiling over. A half-zipped suitcase sat on the couch, spilling silk dresses and glittering jewelry she had carefully packed for her new life. She shoved another handful of clothes inside and zipped it shut with a snap, her movements deliberate, like she was severing the last thread of their marriage. Daniel Whitmore stood by the doorway, silent, his hospital uniform still on, the green scrubs that made him look more like a cleaner than the man he truly was. His broad shoulders slumped under invisible weight, his fingers tightly gripping a folded letter in his pocket. He had read it earlier that morning, a document proving what Clara had never known: he was the silent majority shareholder of St. Mark's Memorial Hospital. But he had chosen not to tell her. Not yet. Clara's voice cut through the heavy silence. You lost your job as an orderly, Daniel. Do you even understand what that means? You can't even keep the lowest position in a hospital. You clean floors, Daniel. Floors. She spat the last word like it was poison. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had always known Clara's hunger for status. He had heard the sharpness in her tone at hospital fundraisers, where she compared him to the surgeons and administrators she admired. He had hoped her love would outweigh her ambition. But tonight, her mask was gone. I won't waste my life with a man who's nothing more than a failure, Clara continued, her chest heaving. Patrick is the chief surgeon. He's everything you're not. Respected. Powerful. Worthy. At the mention of Patrick Reynolds, Daniel's eyes flickered, just briefly. Clara noticed, mistaking it for weakness, and smiled, a cruel smile of victory. She wanted him to beg, to collapse at her feet, to prove that leaving him was justified. Instead, Daniel simply exhaled, slow and measured. He bent down, picking up a stray sock that had fallen from the suitcase. His movements were calm, almost too calm, as if he wasn't losing his wife but watching a storm pass by. Clara, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Be careful what you chase. Not every crown is gold. Her laughter was sharp, mocking. Spare me your riddles, Daniel. By Christmas, you'll be out of my life. Patrick has already promised me a place by his side. You're nothing but a mistake I regret. In the hallway, their 8-year-old daughter Sophia peeked through the doorframe, clutching her teddy bear. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she watched her mother wheel the suitcase away. Daniel noticed her, and for the first time that night, his expression cracked. He crouched down, gently brushing a tear from Sophia's cheek. Daddy, she whispered, don't let Mommy go. Daniel pressed the folded letter deeper into his pocket and kissed the top of her head. Some truths, my love, he murmured, can't be rushed. Sophia blinked, confused. Clara was already gone, the front door slamming behind her like a gavel sealing a verdict. But Daniel's eyes lingered on the door, not with despair, but with a fire Clara had never seen in him before. The night air outside St. Mark's Memorial Hospital felt different to Clara. She strutted across the parking lot, her suitcase rolling behind her, as if she was walking into destiny. Patrick Reynolds was waiting, leaning casually against his sleek black Mercedes. His white coat was off, replaced by a tailored suit, the gleam of his cufflinks catching the streetlights. To Clara, he looked like a king welcoming his queen. Patrick opened the car door with a smirk. "You look liberated," he said, his voice smooth as silk. Clara let out a laugh that was half nervous, half triumphant. "I've waited years for this moment. No more scrubbing floors beside a man who couldn't even hold on to the lowest job in the hospital." As she slid into the car, a memory flashed through her mind, a fundraiser 3 years earlier. Daniel had been assigned to tidy the hall while Patrick gave the keynote speech. She had stood in the crowd, her cheeks burning as other women whispered, "Isn't that your husband? The janitor-looking one?" Patrick had approached her then, offering a glass of champagne with a sly smile. "You deserve better company," he'd whispered. That seed had grown into tonight. Patrick started the engine, his eyes cutting toward her. "Daniel doesn't deserve you. He never did. You'll have my name, my power, my world." Clara's lips curled into a smile. "By Christmas, everyone in this hospital will know I made the right choice." But she didn't notice the security guard in the shadows, an old man named Victor, Daniel's childhood friend, watching her leave. He shook his head, muttering under his breath, "She thinks she's trading up, she doesn't know the storm she's walking into." His words hung in the night like a warning. Inside the hospital, Daniel walked through the quiet corridors, stripped of his uniform badge. His mind replayed his father's final words in a dimly lit study 10 years earlier. "The hospital will be yours one day, son. But don't reveal it too soon. Watch people's hearts first. Wealth will always expose the ones who never truly loved you." Daniel had promised, but tonight that promise felt like chains cutting into his chest. Naomi Brooks, the young nurse, passed by carrying patient charts. She paused, noticing the distant look in his eyes. "Daniel," she whispered, "I don't believe what they're saying about you. I know you. You'd never harm a patient." Her voice trembled with sincerity. He forced a small smile. "Thank you, Naomi. Loyalty is rare. Hold on to it." Naomi lingered, her gaze softening as if she wanted to say more, but footsteps echoed down the hall. Patrick and Clara's laughter carried like daggers. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. He didn't turn to watch, but his hand brushed his pocket where the letter still rested. Patrick's voice, arrogant and booming, echoed, "By New Year's, this hospital will be mine in more ways than one." Daniel's eyes darkened, a storm rising within them. He whispered to himself, unheard, "Not if I burn it all down first." His face, calm but dangerous, a man betrayed and calculating. Clara thought she had escaped. Patrick thought he had conquered. Neither saw the shadow of revenge already forming. Clara adjusted the diamond bracelet Patrick had given her, admiring how it caught the chandelier light in his lavish penthouse. The room smelled of polished wood and red wine, a far cry from the modest apartment she had shared with Daniel. She sipped her glass, laughing as Patrick entertained a group of surgeons who had gathered for his private dinner party. He introduced her as though she were a trophy he'd won. "You see, gentlemen," Patrick said, raising his glass, "life rewards those who know how to climb. And some of us don't waste time dragging dead weight along." His eyes gleamed, daring Clara to catch the insult directed at her former husband. She smiled, but inside, something flickered. The arrogance was sharper in private than she had expected. Later, when the guests left, Clara asked lightly, "Do you always talk about Daniel like that?" Patrick smirked, loosening his tie. "Your ex. He's a nobody. The hospital board barely noticed him. Men like me, we make history." Clara let the words sink in, pretending agreement. But a flash of memory broke through, Daniel carrying Sophia on his back after a long shift, whispering silly bedtime stories to make her laugh. For a moment, Clara's chest tightened, but she shook it off. She had chosen this life. She couldn't look back. Back at the hospital, Daniel walked into the staff cafeteria, where whispers followed him like shadows. Some mocked, some pitted, but he ignored them all. His eyes scanned the board pinned with hospital schedules and announcements. Patrick's name was everywhere: head of committees, leading surgeon, keynote speaker. Clara's name, too, had begun appearing on charity flyers as Dr. Reynolds' partner. Naomi approached with a tray in hand, lowering her voice. "Daniel, you should know something." She glanced around nervously before sliding a folded paper toward him. "I overheard Dr. Hayes talking. Patrick's been diverting hospital funds. They're covering it with fake invoices. If it blows up, everyone on the inside goes down." Daniel unfolded the paper, his eyes narrowing as he read. It wasn't proof, but it was a thread, and he knew how to pull threads until the whole fabric unraveled. "Why tell me?" he asked, studying her face. Naomi hesitated, then said softly, "Because I know you're not what you pretend to be. You see everything. You don't talk much, but you watch." Her eyes lingered, almost pleading, as though she sensed there was more to him than the world believed. Daniel gave no answer, but as she walked away, he clenched the paper in his fist. In his mind, his father's voice echoed, "Power doesn't always need to shout, son. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it strikes when no one expects it." That night, Daniel sat alone in his dark apartment. Sophia slept in the next room, her small breath steady and innocent. He lit a single lamp and pulled out the sealed letter again, the one naming him as majority shareholder. He traced his father's signature with his thumb. "I gave you time, Clara," he whispered into the silence. "I gave you love. You wanted power. Now you'll taste it, but through fire." His eyes glinted with something dangerous, not sadness, not weakness, but the calm rage of a man plotting revenge with precision. Clara woke to the sound of Patrick's voice on the phone. His words were clipped, impatient, his tone far colder than the warmth he had shown her weeks earlier. "If the invoices don't balance by Monday, Price, I'll bury you along with them. Don't call me again with excuses." He ended the call with a slam of the receiver. Clara lay still in bed, watching him through half-open eyes. For the first time since leaving Daniel, she felt a ripple of unease. At breakfast, she tried to push it away. "Patrick, people are already calling me Mrs. Reynolds. Isn't that wonderful?" He didn't look up from the newspaper. "Don't embarrass me in public, Clara. You're not Mrs. Reynolds yet." Her smile faltered. I thought we agreed." "You thought wrong." His eyes cut into her, sharp and dismissive. "Don't push." The words stung more than she wanted to admit. In her mind, a flashback hit, Daniel holding her hand years earlier, after she miscarried their first child. He had said softly, "You're still my everything, Clara. We'll get through this together." She shook the memory away, clinging to her diamond bracelet instead. She couldn't look back. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in Victor's garage, the smell of motor oil and dust heavy in the air. Old childhood photos of them lined the wall, two boys grinning, never knowing how ruthless adulthood would be. Victor leaned against the hood of a battered pickup. "She's gone, brother." "But Patrick? He's greedy, reckless. I've seen men like him. They think they're untouchable. You want him destroyed? You'll need patience." Daniel's eyes were steady. "Patience I have. What I need are tools." He pulled the paper Naomi had given him from his pocket. "He's bleeding money. If I pull the right string, everything he's built collapses." Victor chuckled darkly. "Just like when you built that model hospital out of matchsticks as a kid. You used to set fire to it just to watch how fast it fell." Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. "This time, the fire won't be pretend." At the hospital, Naomi noticed Patrick berating a young intern in the corridor. His voice echoed, "Do you think this is a charity? One mistake and you'll never work in medicine again." Clara walked in just as Patrick shoved the clipboard back into the intern's chest. Her face tightened. This was not the charming man who had whispered promises of respect. She tried to touch his arm, to calm him. Patrick jerked away. "Don't involve yourself in hospital matters. You're here to look pretty." The words landed like blows. Clara forced a brittle laugh, hiding her humiliation, but the nurses whispered. She could feel their eyes, their judgment. For the first time, she realized, she had traded one kind of shame for another. That night, Clara stood on the balcony, staring at the city lights. Patrick poured himself a drink, his back to her. He didn't notice the single tear sliding down her cheek. She whispered to herself, "What have I done?" And across town, Daniel whispered the same words, but with fire in his eyes, not regret. The boardroom of St. Mark's Memorial Hospital gleamed under fluorescent lights, its long mahogany table surrounded by men and women who carried power in their tailored suits. Daniel sat quietly in the back, unnoticed, dressed plainly as though he were still just an ex-orderly. His presence wasn't questioned. Victor had pulled strings, arranging for him to sit in as a guest while Patrick gave his quarterly report. Patrick stood tall at the head of the table, his words flowing with confidence. "Our surgical wing has outperformed every projection. With new investments, we'll expand research and position St. Mark's as the leader in cardiac innovation." The board nodded approvingly, impressed by his charisma. But Daniel's eyes narrowed. He saw the slight tremor in Patrick's hand as he flipped through glossy charts. He knew what it meant. Patrick was hiding something. Henry Cole, the board chairman, raised a brow. "Dr. Reynolds, these figures are impressive, but they're also unusual. We'll need a closer audit." Patrick laughed lightly, deflecting. "Henry, I assure you, everything is under control." Daniel leaned forward just slightly, his gaze meeting Henry's. It wasn't time to reveal his hand, but Henry caught it, the unspoken signal of a deeper truth. Henry's lips twitched into the faintest smile. Meanwhile, Clara wandered the corridors of the hospital, dressed elegantly as Patrick's partner, enjoying the admiring glances from staff. Yet as she turned a corner near the finance office, she froze. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, Samuel Price, a board member, spoke in a hushed, urgent voice. "You can't keep this up, Patrick. If the auditors sniff even once, we're both finished. The invoices for the medical supplies, they don't exist." Clara pressed her hand to her mouth, her pulse racing. Patrick's voice came sharp, "Shut your mouth, Samuel. Do you want to lose everything? Stick to the plan." The papers in her clutch trembled. She stepped back quietly, her heart pounding. The glamour of Patrick's world suddenly cracked, showing something darker beneath. She remembered the promise he'd made the night she left Daniel, "With me, you'll always be safe." But safe from what? Or from whom? Later that evening, Clara confronted him in the penthouse. "Patrick. I heard you today. With Samuel. What are you hiding?" Patrick turned, his jaw tightening. "Don't eavesdrop, Clara. You don't understand the weight of running a hospital." Her voice shook. "Or are you stealing from it?" The slap came fast, sharp against her cheek. Clara gasped, stunned. Patrick's eyes burned with fury. "Don't ever question me again." She stumbled back, tears welling. For the first time, she thought of Daniel not with contempt, but with longing. His gentleness. His patience. His warning, "Be careful what you chase. Not every crown is gold." The memory cut deep. Across the city, Daniel sat at his desk, the letter of ownership beside him, Naomi's paper of false invoices pinned under his palm. He wrote a name at the top of a list, Patrick Reynolds. Below it, another name, Samuel Price. He whispered into the silence, "I'll burn them both down." Brick by brick. The penthouse windows stretched high, but Clara felt trapped inside them. The bruise on her cheek, carefully covered with makeup, pulsed with every heartbeat. Patrick had left early for surgery rounds, his temper already boiling over before breakfast. Alone, she wandered through his study, a place he had told her never to enter. The drawers were locked, but one had been left slightly open. Inside she found a ledger, filled with numbers she didn't understand. Still, she recognized Samuel Price's name scribbled in the margins, and dates circled in red. Something illegal was happening here, something Patrick had promised her she would never have to know. She froze as the door creaked. Margaret Reynolds stood in the hallway, Patrick's ex-wife, her eyes cold and assessing. "Careful, dear," Margaret said with a bitter smile. "Patrick's study is where wives stop being wives. That's where I learned the truth." Without another word, she walked away, heels clicking against the marble. Clara's throat tightened. She had traded Daniel's loyalty for this. Across town, Daniel sat in a dim cafe with Detective Laura Kim. She slid a folder across the table. "Your hunch was right. Patrick's invoices are fake. He's been diverting hospital equipment to the black market, using Samuel Price as his broker. I can't move yet, I need an insider to testify, or it won't hold." Daniel opened the folder, scanning the evidence, his jaw tightening. "I'll get you what you need. But when this falls, I don't want a slap on the wrist. I want him ruined." Kim studied him, noting the steel in his voice. "Most people who come to me want justice. You want blood." Daniel's eyes didn't waver. "He took my wife, parades my daughter through gossip, and bleeds my father's legacy dry. Justice isn't enough." That night, Patrick walked the hospital halls, sensing eyes on him. He barked orders at interns, but every shadow made him turn his head. In the staff cafeteria, whispers hushed when he entered. His arrogance cracked for the first time, paranoia settling in. Naomi watched quietly from the corner, noting how Daniel never looked directly at Patrick, only studied him from a distance. Her chest ached with admiration and fear. She remembered the way Daniel had once fixed a broken gurney late at night while others mocked him. "Sometimes the smallest man in the room carries the heaviest crown," she murmured under her breath. Patrick's phone buzzed. A message flashed, "We're being watched." "Shut it down." His face paled, but he forced a laugh as he pocketed it. Still, his hands shook when he scrubbed in for surgery. Meanwhile, Clara sat in her car outside the hospital, torn. She wanted to walk inside, to see Daniel, to apologize. But shame rooted her in place. Instead, she whispered to herself, "If Patrick falls, what happens to me?" Daniel stood outside under the cold night sky, the hospital looming behind him. His voiceover would whisper the answer, "When he falls, Clara, you'll know what betrayal costs." The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and polished marble floors, the annual St. Mark's Memorial Hospital Gala drawing the city's elite. Patrick stood at the center like a conquering general, Clara on his arm in a silver gown, her smile fixed but hollow. The whispers of women admiring her jewelry only half registered. Every time she looked up, she caught reflections of herself in the mirrors, not radiant, but trapped. Patrick raised his glass, his voice carrying over the room. "Tonight we celebrate not only the triumphs of medicine but the triumphs of vision. This hospital is where miracles are born." The applause echoed. Clara forced herself to clap, her cheeks still stinging beneath layers of makeup. At the edge of the crowd, Daniel stood in a plain black suit, unnoticed by most. Only Henry Cole caught sight of him, offering a nod of recognition. Daniel remained still, watching Patrick bask in his moment of glory. The speeches ended, and music swelled. Couples twirled across the floor. Clara excused herself, retreating to a quiet corner. She caught sight of Daniel near the exit. Her breath caught. His presence was like a ghost from a past she had buried too quickly. He didn't approach her, but his eyes met hers for a moment, calm, unreadable. She turned away, heart pounding, her fingers trembling against her clutch. Moments later, Detective Kim slipped into the gala, blending among guests in an evening dress. She whispered something into Henry Cole's ear, slipping him a small envelope. Henry took the stage with a forced smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, before dessert, a small announcement. Our board has voted to initiate a full audit of hospital finances. Transparency is the foundation of trust." The words struck like thunder. Murmurs erupted around the room. Patrick's jaw tightened, his smile faltering. He stepped forward. "Henry, this is highly irregular." Henry cut him off smoothly. "Irregular, or overdue?" He opened the envelope, flashing documents. "Anonymous reports suggest funds have been diverted. The truth will out." Gasps spread. Clara's stomach dropped. She glanced at Patrick, his face stiffening with barely contained rage. She knew instantly who had triggered this, Daniel. She could feel his calm presence like a storm cloud gathering. After the announcement, Patrick stormed into a side hall, dragging Clara with him. His hand clamped painfully around her wrist. "Did you know about this?" His voice was a hiss. She shook her head quickly, fear flashing in her eyes. "I swear, Patrick, I didn't." He slammed his fist against the wall beside her. "If I fall, Clara, you fall with me. Remember that." Her knees weakened, the diamonds on her bracelet suddenly feeling like shackles. For the first time, she wished she could tear it off and run. In her mind, Daniel's voice replayed. "Be careful what you chase. Not every crown is gold." Back in the ballroom, Daniel slipped quietly into the night, unseen. His lips curved into the faintest smile. This was only the beginning. The hospital corridors buzzed with tension as auditors in gray suits walked past nurses and doctors, carrying clipboards and sealed files. Whispers followed them like shadows. Patrick's confident stride was still there, but his eyes darted too often, his hand gripped his phone too tightly. Clara followed at a distance, dressed impeccably, but every step felt heavier. She had once walked these halls as Daniel's wife, ashamed of his lowly role. Now she walked as Patrick's partner, ashamed of something far worse. A group of nurses whispered as she passed. One muttered under her breath, "From orderly's wife to fraudster's mistress." Clara's chest burned, and for the first time she felt the sting of being judged not for Daniel's humility, but for Patrick's corruption. In the boardroom, Henry Cole laid out a spread of documents across the polished table. "These invoices," he said firmly, "don't match our supplier records. Large sums have been redirected to shell companies." Patrick forced a laugh. "Every hospital has discrepancies. You're blowing this out of proportion." Henry's brow arched. "Then explain why these accounts link to a firm registered in Samuel Price's name." The room grew cold. Samuel shifted in his seat, sweat glistening on his forehead. Daniel, seated quietly at the end, leaned forward. He didn't speak, but his calm presence was unsettling. Patrick noticed him at last, his eyes narrowing. "Why is he here?" Patrick snapped. Henry's voice was steel. "Because Mr. Whitmore still has every right to be here." Patrick's jaw tightened, but he swallowed his fury. That evening, Clara slipped into Patrick's study while he showered. She flipped through papers, her hands trembling. There it was. Correspondence between Patrick and Samuel, discussing kickbacks, offshore accounts, and equipment never delivered to the hospital. She stuffed one letter into her clutch before Patrick emerged, toweling his hair. "What are you doing?" His eyes bored into her. Clara forced a smile, hiding the letter against her side. "Just waiting for you." Patrick stepped closer, suspicion written on his face. For a terrifying second, she thought he'd tear her clutch open. Instead, he smirked. "Good. Because you'll need to stand beside me when this storm hits. And if you even think of leaving me," he trailed off, letting the silence finish his threat. Meanwhile, Daniel sat with Detective Kim, placing the letter Clara had stolen on the table. She blinked in surprise. "How did you?" Daniel didn't answer. His voice was calm, cold. "It's enough to bring them down, isn't it?" Kim nodded slowly. "This is more than enough. Samuel will break under questioning. Patrick won't escape this." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his eyes burning with quiet fire. "Then let it begin." Clara lying awake in Patrick's penthouse, the stolen letter's absence from her clutch unnoticed. She stared at the ceiling, realization dawning, Daniel wasn't broken. He was moving in shadows, and when Patrick fell, she would be standing in the rubble. Patrick stormed into the hospital boardroom like a man possessed. His once perfect posture was broken by sleepless nights, his tie loosened, his eyes ringed with shadows. The auditors sat calmly with their files stacked in neat rows. Every page seemed to accuse him. "This is a witch hunt." Patrick's voice cracked as he slammed his fist against the table. "I've given this hospital my genius, my hands, my reputation. And this is how you repay me." Henry Cole's tone was level, deliberate. "Genius does not excuse theft, Dr. Reynolds. We now have bank records connecting your signature to multiple offshore accounts. If you cannot explain this, you will be suspended immediately." Patrick's gaze darted wildly. Samuel Price avoided his eyes, sweat dripping down his temple. The room was tense, silence thick enough to choke. Then Daniel rose from his seat in the corner, his movements slow, deliberate. For the first time, Patrick seemed to notice him not as a shadow, but as a presence. "You," Patrick sneered, his voice trembling. "You think you can humiliate me, Whitmore? You're nothing but a fired orderly." Daniel's voice was calm, surgical. "Then why does it scare you that I'm still here?" The board members exchanged glances. Patrick's face flushed crimson, his composure cracking further. Clara, seated silently behind him, felt her stomach twist. She had never seen Patrick so desperate, so small. For a moment, she glanced at Daniel, his expression unreadable, and shame washed over her like ice water. That night in the penthouse, Patrick's fury turned on Clara. He poured himself whiskey, his hands shaking, his eyes wild. "This is your fault," he spat. "You were supposed to make me look untouchable. Instead, they're tearing me down." Clara recoiled. "Patrick, I stood by you. I left my husband for you. I..." "Don't say his name." Patrick hurled the glass against the wall, shards exploding across the floor. He stepped toward her, and Clara backed away, her heart hammering. She had never felt smaller. The flash of Daniel's gentle eyes returned to her mind, the way he had carried Sophia, the way he had whispered comfort through their darkest nights. Regret was a knife twisting in her gut. She realized Patrick had not stolen her from Daniel, she had thrown herself into a cage and handed Patrick the key. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his apartment, Sophia asleep in the next room. He unfolded his father's letter once again, then placed it beside the signed ownership documents Evelyn Grace had prepared years earlier. He pressed his palm to the paper, as if sealing a covenant. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "Tomorrow, you'll know who you tried to break." His eyes lifted to the window, the city lights sprawling below. The calm was gone now, what burned in his gaze was not patience, but a storm ready to be unleashed. Patrick paced like a cornered animal in his penthouse, Clara trembling in silence, and Daniel steady, composed, preparing for the reveal that would destroy them both. The boardroom was packed, tension so thick it felt like smoke in the air. Every major figure at St. Mark's Memorial Hospital was present, auditors, lawyers, journalists invited under the guise of transparency. Patrick paced like a caged animal, sweat glistening under the harsh lights. Clara sat behind him, pale and silent, her hands clutching her clutch so tightly her knuckles turned white. Henry Cole called the meeting to order. "Dr. Reynolds, we've reviewed the findings. The evidence of misappropriation and fraud is overwhelming. Before we proceed to a vote, do you wish to defend yourself? Patrick slammed his hands against the table. This is a setup. I built this hospital's reputation. Without me, you're nothing. Do you want it to crumble? A hush fell as the doors opened. Daniel walked in, dressed in a tailored dark suit. No longer an orderly, no longer in the shadows. Clara gasped, her heart lurching painfully in her chest. Patrick froze, his fury morphing into confusion. What is he doing here? Patrick barked. Henry rose slowly. Because it's time the truth is known. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to reintroduce you to the majority shareholder of St. Mark's Memorial Hospital. Mr. Daniel Whitmore. The words detonated like a bomb. Gasps, whispers, stunned silence. Clara's lips parted in shock, her breath catching. Her eyes darted to Daniel, the man she had mocked, abandoned, betrayed, standing now with quiet authority. Patrick's face twisted in disbelief. No. No, this is impossible. He's nothing. He's... Daniel's voice cut through the noise, calm but edged with steel. I was patient, Patrick. I scrubbed your floors, carried your instruments, listened to your boasts. I let you show me who you truly were. And you showed me everything. Greed, arrogance, betrayal. His eyes shifted briefly toward Clara. From both of you. Clara flinched, tears pricking her eyes. She wanted to speak, to beg, but her throat locked. Detective Kim stepped forward, dropping a thick folder onto the table. With Mr. Whitmore's cooperation, we have records, signatures, and correspondence tying Dr. Reynolds to multiple fraudulent accounts. Samuel Price has confessed to his role. Patrick Reynolds, you are under arrest. Patrick lunged forward, but security restrained him. You think this is over, he roared as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. You'll regret this, Whitmore. Daniel didn't move, his eyes cold. No, Patrick. You'll regret underestimating me. As Patrick was dragged out, the room erupted in murmurs. Clara sat frozen, staring at Daniel with wide, wet eyes. She rose unsteadily, whispering, Daniel. I made a mistake. Please, forgive me. Take me back. Daniel regarded her in silence, the weight of years in his gaze. Then he turned toward Sophia, who had slipped into the room with his mother, Abigail. The little girl ran to him, arms wrapping around his waist. Daniel lifted her gently, pressing a kiss to her hair. He looked at Clara one last time, his words final and devastating. You had love. You chose power. Now live with the crown you chased. Clara's knees buckled, her tears spilling freely as Daniel walked away, Sophia in his arms, Naomi waiting quietly near the doorway with pride in her eyes. Clara, left in silence, her jewels glinting like chains under the sterile hospital lights. She had traded loyalty for vanity, and lost everything.